Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about how to do Swedish family history. And so I'm not an expert at doing Swedish family history, but I've learned enough that I want to be able to help others learn how to do it. And from my experience, I've learned that anyone can do Swedish family history. In fact, I've found that it's easier to do Swedish family history than it is to do family history in the United States. And also, as a note, I'm going to pronounce things not in the way that it should be, just so people can follow along. So let's get started. So if you didn't know where Sweden is, this is where Sweden is. It's in Europe. Sweden is broken up into a bunch of different counties, and these counties have changed over the years, some combining and stuff like that. And this one that has the arrows pointed to is Skaraborg, and this is the one that I'm mostly going to be focusing on. And this is a picture of Skaraborg, and as you can see, there are a bunch of different parishes inside of Skaraborg. So for example, this is a zoomed up version of that image. We've got Jung, Berg, and Varv parish. Those are all different parishes. And inside of each individual parish, there are farms. Sometimes they're called villages. You can think of them as neighborhoods. So it is these books that you see right here that we get our genealogical information from. And so how it works is the records were kept by the ministers of the Lutheran Church. And so they had different books for all sorts of different things. They had books for people moving into their parish, moving out of their parish. They had books to keep track of individual people and how well they know their religious information. Those are the household examinations. And these books are the ones that we use to do our family history.
We access these books online through various websites. And there are three basic steps for doing Swedish genealogy. The first one is to determine which book your individuals should be in or will most likely be in. Second step is to find that book. And then the third step is to search through that book for those individuals. And so to help with the second step, which is to find the correct book, I have an analogy to help you. And because various websites do their record organization differently, that it's nice to be able to navigate each of them well. And so this analogy will help to piece together how to get and find the right book, and more concrete examples and demonstrations will be done later.
The way that I found works well is to think about a library. And there's different wings of this library, and those different wings are the different counties. Inside of those different wings, there's different rooms, and each room is a different parish. And in each room, there's different shelves. So the top shelf might be the birth records, the next shelf might be the household examination records, the next one might be the marriages. And then on the shelf, these are arranged chronologically. And so the earliest ones on the left, latest ones on the right. And so if we're wanting to go and find a specific book, and when I say find a specific book, I mean use a website to locate the images in those books. you would have to figure out which county it is, which parish it is, what type of book you're looking for, and the year range. And if you can pin down those things, then you'll be able to find the correct book that you're looking for.
Each of Sweden's counties has a different letter to represent them. So for example, like you see on the second line, we've got Gotland, and that is represented by the letter I. And so sometimes websites or people, when they're citing different records, and including the county, they will cite the county using one of the letters. And so if you see those letters, then that is what they're talking about. There are also codes for the different types of books. So for example, we've got the household examinations. Their code is AI or AII, and births are C, deaths and burials are F, and that is consistent over all different websites. And so sometimes people will write out the whole thing. They'll write births. Sometimes they'll just write the code. And these are the records that we're going to be using to do family history. There are more records than this, of course, but these are the ones that you need. These are the only ones you need to do basic Swedish family history. So for example, if you see the notation that we see right here with Dimbo, we've got Dimbo, and then the R would be representing the county of Skaraborg. And then the AI is representing that it's a household examination record book. The 9 is saying that it's the ninth household examination record book for the parish of Dimbo. And then those years are what years that book covers. And so see if you can figure out the second one. You can pause it and I'll come back to it in just a second. Some of the different records will include other types of events in there as well. What I mean by this is that the book that is labeled births, it says on the front births, it might also have the marriages inside of that book. And so instead of labeling the book births and marriages, they just pick one label and stick with it. And so I'll go over that later on how to figure that stuff out. But be aware of that, as well as sometimes it will be several books that will cover the births. So maybe in Dimbo, between 1829 and 1834, they needed 2 books for all of the births. And so there would be 2 books with a code C, not the code AI. There'd be a code C, and then there would be the number, 7 and 8. That shows that there's 2 consecutive books. And so that's something also to be aware of. So if you figured out the bottom one, Lena, pretty easy, hopefully, but Lena is the parish, and Uppsala is the county, and it's the 7th book in the birth series of books, and then that specific book covers the year range 1838 to 1861.
There are more types of books than this, but these are the basic ones that we'll use for beginning family history in Sweden. So something to be aware of is that the spelling of things have changed. Here's just a little chart that shows some of those things. So for example, the letter K in today's Swedish alphabet could have been written 100 years ago as a CK, a CH, a G, a GG, C, or a Q.
And so knowing that information is important for the reason that spelling has changed over time. So the way that the minister wrote things and the way that modern Swedish spells something is different. But using the chart, you can determine if it's going to be the same word or not. So, for example, back in the 1800s, the parish that is now known, that is now spelled as V-A-R-V, Varv, was spelled H-V-A-R-F. And so, if you're not aware that the spelling will have changed, then you might not recognize that this is the same parish.
And so here's another example. They replace has an E in the handwritten version when the way it's written now is with an A with 2 dots above it.
And so websites, modernized places will spell it the modernized way. In the physical books, they will spell it the older version way. And also, sometimes there'll be like an S at the end of it, and you can basically just ignore that. It's possessive. And there are a few things that are going to be more important to know if they're spelled differently. One is the name of the parish, so you can translate between how the minister has spelled it and how it is spelled nowadays. And then also the same thing goes for the neighborhoods / village / farms, whatever you want to call those places. The same thing will happen in those places. So the bottom line here is just that don't let the variations in spelling throw you off. They're spelled differently from time period to time period, but they're still the same parish, or whatever word it is, it might have changed slightly. Basically, how you can tell how it's going to be spelled is if it was written by someone who lived 100 or more years ago, then it's going to be written in older spelling. And if it's written in more recently, then it'll be written in more modern spelling. And so the handwritten stuff inside of the books, that will be the old spelling. And then anything that's typed up, like the index at the beginning of the book, that was then placed in there afterwards. Or the way that websites spell it, they will spell it the modern way, how to spell it. This is something that is pretty simple, but can be important if you don't realize this. Some of the books that you will deal with have people listed on the left page and on the right page. But some of them will only have the person listed on the left side of the page, and then the right page will just be a continuation. Basically, there's a lot of columns that they have in that book, and so it takes up 2 sides of a page instead of just one. So for example, on the top we see that there are going to be people on the left side and there are going to be different people on the right side. We can tell that because the headings repeat themselves. The first column on the left side is the same as the first column on the right side, and so forth. While on the lower one, we can see that right at the page, on the right page at the beginning, it's different stuff. It doesn't repeat. And so we don't have to worry about anything on that right side of the page when we're just looking for the individual's name. While on the top one, books like the top, we have to look on the left side and we have to look on the right side. So be aware of that. So basically, the bottom line is that Some books have the information spread across 2 pages, and some have it just compressed into one side. So you don't want to skip over the right half of the book when it's actually more information, not just a continuation of the left side.
And so just like to give credit to these different places where I got the images from.